Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari, and today we are talking about the worst books that I read in 2021. Now, typical disclaimers. First off, not all these books necessarily came out in 2021. I just read them this year. And secondly, if you like some of these books and I dislike them, that's okay. We have different tastes. But today is my birthday. Like, the day you're seeing this is my birthday. So you're not allowed to say anything mean about it in the comments or dislike it. I don't think you can dislike on YouTube anymore. Besides that, you can't say anything mean about it because it's my birthday and you're required by law to be nice to me on my birthday. So, as my birthday treat to you and myself, let's get angry about some books. Now, these books are in some sort of vague sense of order. They're probably not perfect, but like, the further we go in this video, the more I hate the book, if that makes sense. So we're gonna start at number 10 and talk about The Caged Queen by Kristen Cicerelli. This is book 2 in her Ascari series, and these books are like companion novels, so probably should read them in order, but they all follow different characters. Like, they follow the same timeline, but they follow different characters, so each one's a little bit different. And this one is a very easy why I hated it so much, and that's because it has one of my most unliked tropes, which is miscommunication. Specifically miscommunication in a romance. Like, this book didn't exist if the two characters who are supposedly fucking married would have had 15 seconds of a conversation with each other and be like, hey, this is what I feel about this, and oh, you thought I thought that? No, I thought this. It's all resolved. This book didn't need to exist. I freaking hate the miscommunication trope more than anything. And the writing in this book was not good enough to make up for the hot garbage that was a miscommunication trope. Next up, at number 9 is Witches of Ashen Rune by E. Latmere. Now, this book had like all of the bad things about it. The writing was awful. It was very much tell and not show. The main character, who's supposed to be a girl named Danya, super powerful witch, she does absolutely freaking nothing. She does nothing. Like, we're told the entire book how great and powerful and useful she is gonna be, and then she chokes. Every time she gets into a situation where her power and her skill and her supposed usefulness is needed, she chokes. Or it's like, oh, well, I'm a new witch, I never learned that. It's like, so why were you needed in the first place if you don't know anything about being a witch? And then, like, one of the other plot lines is she's like the preacher's daughter and he's super like overbearingly religious and burn all witches and stuff like that, but that is never a conflict in the book. There's like, she just leaves her house, spends absolutely no time with her father, and he's just like, yeah, cool, peace out. And you're like, you just set him up to be this like overbearing preacher father figure and then forgot about it for the rest of the book. Other things, like the love interest is abusive, but it's okay because she's a woman. No, abuse is never good in any situation. There's perspectives from the bad guy, which, let me tell you, this author does not have the skill to pull off like a basic book, much less an evil, believable bad guy perspective. Just all around, like, the idea of this book was like, oh, that could be interesting, and the execution was abysmal. It's like, hey, I got a great idea, but I have no idea how to write. Ta-da! Next up is book 2 of the program series called The Treatment by Suzanne Young. The extent of my problem with this book can be summed up pretty easily by saying teenagers aren't this stupid. Like, I get that teenagers are immature and they can be stupid, but they're not this stupid. Like, this was obviously written by an older woman who thinks teenagers are freaking idiotic and don't have, like, a single ounce of sense. Teenagers aren't this stupid. The timetable for the plot of this is a hot mess. It doesn't add up for this to actually have worked out like it did. Like, there wasn't enough time, but there was also, like, there wasn't enough time for certain things to have happened, and then there was, like, way too much time for other things to have happened. It's just, timetable doesn't work, and, like, the medical stuff about this, and, like, the confidential stuff, no. There's a whole big plot line of people are getting lobotomized because they signed NDAs, and then nothing can happen because they signed the NDAs. Like, NDAs don't work that way. Like, you can sign all the NDAs in the world, but if somebody lobotomizes you or lobotomizes people you know, you can break that NDA in a court of law. That's how pretty much all NDAs works, is you can break them in a court of law. But yeah, this was just heroically idiotic. And it was trying for something, but the something it was trying for just doesn't make any rational sense. So, awful. This whole series wasn't the greatest of that, like, whole early 2010s era of young adult dystopian, and this book was by far the worst of the whole series. Next up at number 7, we get an appearance by one of my absolute least favorite authors, which is A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. Now, I want to start this particular book out with saying I understand a lot of people really like Alex E. Harrow. She's a very popular author. A lot of people like her writing. I hate everything I've ever read by her, and she keeps getting nominated for awards and acclaims and stuff like that, where I have to read more of these absolutely trash books by her that I know going into that I'm gonna hate because I don't like her writing. And this one is no different, but I think this might be the worst. Now, this is a very short novella that is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, kind of, because it's really not a retelling so much as every single Sleeping Beauty like story and retelling across the centuries is apparently just a parallel dimension, and everybody's a Sleeping Beauty story, and somehow the parallel dimensions collide in this book. And this whole thing is a Sleeping Beauty story, and the first paragraph basically starts out saying that if you like fairy tales, especially Sleeping Beauty, you can't be a feminist, that you're worthless as a woman, and you hate yourself, and you're just surrounded by misogyny that you will never be able to get past because you like fairy tales and the princess being saved by a prince. How are you going to start a story that you are retelling by saying anybody who likes this story is trash? The dog agrees with me. So yeah, this book was basically destined to be on this list as soon as it showed up on Goodreads this year. I still hate Alex E. Harrow. I will probably continue to hate everything she writes, and probably keep having to read everything she writes because she always gets nominated for shit. Y'all need better taste in authors than this woman. At number 6 on this list is probably not a surprising book at all, and another book that I actively read, and that was Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. Now, this book was absolutely nothing but a cash grab. Ernest Cline was like, hey, all of this fame and fortune I've gotten from writing Ready Player One, I haven't been able to duplicate that with the other stories I've put out. People just really like this story, and I need some income. So let me write a sequel to a book that doesn't need a sequel at all, and I have no new ideas, so I'm going to rehash the exact same plot. No one's going to learn anything at all, but this time we'll do 90s pop culture instead of 80s pop culture. Fantastic. Yeah. None of the characters grow in this book. No one learns anything. All of the problems, like, that's the setup at the beginning of the book for conflict, not a single one of them gets resolved at the end of the book, but suddenly everything is forgiven and the white savior of Wade Watts comes through. If you liked Ready Player One, this book will ruin any enjoyment you had of Ready Player One. So I highly recommend never picking this up, and your life will be better for it. Just stick with Ready Player One. I used to love Ready Player One. This book made me hate Ready Player One, and I will probably never be able to enjoy it again. So do not do the same thing to yourself, and just stay away from this book and keep your love of the really decent book that was Ready Player One. Next up is a BookBox book that I got from Page One, my Page One subscription, and the idea behind this is I wanted books with unlikable but strong female characters, and unlikable, yes. This was The Sin in the Steel by Ryan Van Loan, and some of you may be familiar with the concept of men who try to write women but don't think of women as people or human beings, and so they fail spectacularly at writing women. Apparently, Ryan Van Loan thinks that boobs are just pockets. Women don't need pockets in their clothes. They just shove everything in their boobs, whether it's guns or writing utensils. It's a perfect storage pocket that every woman in existence carries around with her, because this man has never had sex in his entire life, as far as I'm aware. But yes, all of the characters in this book are large-breasted women who are extremely attractive, but they're very, very mean, and their boobs are pockets. What is that I hear? Somebody screaming the word incel in the background? Yes, that's exactly what I think this author is. On top of the fact that the women are caricatures of a bad wet dream, the book has no plot. The author just flits around, doesn't know what he's doing. He sets up scenes that you think might be important later in the book, but they're not. They probably could have been cut completely and no one would have noticed the difference. But there's no structure to this book. There's no real understanding of a plot line to this book. No one really knows what's going on. It's awful writing in so many different compounded ways. The characterizations and the plots are kind of told to you. Like, we're told that she is doing things for this specific reason and that this is her personality, and then in action we don't see any of these things. Like, supposedly she is doing things in this book because she wants to save the poor people, but she doesn't give a shit about people. She will just randomly kill innocents or let innocents die all the time and just be like, yeah, I'm too lazy to care. And then she's supposed to be some sort of autistic savant, and there's no sign of any actual intelligence from her. Anything that happens seems to be solved through luck, like sheer luck, and absolutely nothing else. So poor writing all around, and the fact that the author does not believe that women are human beings or people, and thus cannot write a woman character, this book is awful, and I highly suggest you avoid it at all cost. All right, the next one, this is going to be a very, very straightforward review. Number 4 is Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Gibbons. And reading the book, pretty decent, didn't have any problems reading it. And then it turns out Florence Gibbons, who is a white woman, a thin white woman, just almost word for word plagiarized a fat black author named Shindra Green's What a Time to Be Alone. So, and then took her conventional attractiveness and plagiarized this other woman's book, took her conventional attractiveness and got a bigger publishing deal with a bigger marketing team behind it. So if you were interested in a book about feminism in general and what women don't owe men, please read What a Time to Be Alone instead, and don't give your money to a woman who has just plagiarized another author. Next up, this was a book that was gifted to me, and it was The Saddest Girl in the World by Kathy Glass. Now, Kathy Glass is a woman who has made a career out of fostering children, which on the surface, that's really fantastic. She gives homes to needy children, and that's a great thing. But what she's done in addition to being a foster mother is she started writing books, fictionalized books, supposedly about these children that she is fostering and the hell that they go through in their lives. But holy shit, does this woman have a white savior complex. She thinks that none of these children would survive without her, and you know what? Maybe none of these children would survive without somebody like her, but not her specifically. But according to Kathy, she is the best foster parent of all time. There is no other foster parent as amazing as she is, and every other foster parent should aspire to be as amazing as Kathy, except for Kathy is racist. And in this book especially, she talks about a 10-year-old black girl in the most horrible ways. Basically, this is a 10-year-old child, and Kathy talks about how she's terrified of her all of the time because she's such a big girl. And you were projecting your insecurities about her skin color on this small child, and then trying to make a 10-year-old seem terrifying. This girl in the entire book does nothing that's even remotely terrifying other than have dark skin. Towards the end of this book, this girl is put into a more permanent foster home because Kathy's home is, apparently she takes like extreme cases of child abuse and neglect, and very hard to deal with children, keeps them temporarily, gets them kind of in a safer space before they get either long-term foster care or permanently adopted. And basically this young black girl gets adopted by a black woman, and Kathy has an entire chapter where she's talking about how she knows more about black culture than a black woman, and she would have made a better permanent foster home. She doesn't understand why this board who moved this girl to the different foster, or who moved this black girl to a black foster mother, thinks that the black foster mother would do better than Kathy at raising a young black girl. And it's just one of those things where it's like, holy shit, the white savior. And she doesn't even realize. All right, next at number 2 is a book, again from a book box, called Bessie Smith by Jackie Kay. And this book is supposed to be a biography of Bessie Smith's life. And Bessie Smith was a jazz singer, blues singer from the 1930s. And honestly, it doesn't seem like a whole lot is known about her. So what Jackie Kay decided to do in this non-fiction narrative was just make up what she thought Bessie Smith, like a scene in Bessie Smith's life, would look like. And this is the most offensive piece of writing to literally just make up, fictionalize somebody's life and then try to pass it off as a biography. If this would have been a fictionalized narrative where she comes out from the start and she's like, you know what, when she comes out from the start and it's a character who's kind of like Bessie Smith, and it's just romanticized and fictionalized based off of not really knowing a whole lot about Bessie Smith's life other than, you know, arrest records, performances, birth certificates, marriage license, things like that. And you have like this fictionalized narrative that is loosely based off of the idea of Bessie Smith. That would be fine. That would be a different thing. It may not have been a good book, but that would have been a different thing. To literally try to write a biography, not be a biographer, and just fictionalize somebody's life based off of your romanticized ideals of them is awful. I hated this, and I think this is just an insult to this woman's memory, is to romanticize somebody's obviously abusive relationships. And like, in addition to like romanticizing this person, like, Bessie Smith was not a good person. The stuff that we factually know about her paints a completely different picture than the fictionalized narrative that went alongside with these cold hard facts. So you are romanticizing a abusive alcoholic woman into trying to pass off a supposedly nonfiction narrative of this horrible person, but putting it behind rose-tinted glasses of a fictional narrative that you have in your head because you liked her music. So yes, hated this, highly don't recommend. And finally, at number 1 this year, we have 4 Seasons at Angelino's by Carolyn Mcbride. I did not know that one human being in one supposedly rom-com could be so racist. Like, I have to give it to Carolyn Mcbride that she is an equal opportunity racist, and she found a way to insult as many cultures as humanly possible in one book. So if you want to read a rom-com written by the most stereotypical, like, caricature of a Republican, this book is for you. So again, satirical rom-com is what that's supposed to be. There's no satire, there's no romance, and there's no comedy. So I think whatever the antonym of a satirical rom-com is, that's what this book is. On top of all the racism, this is just hugely internalized misogyny. Most of the plot line is the main character trying to seek justification to why men gaslight her and how she's wrong because men don't treat her well, and how all other women in the world are awful and trying to steal her man. So yeah, I don't really want to get into this book because I hated it so much. But racism, misogyny, pretending to be a rom-com. And I don't even like rom-coms to begin with. And we'll just keep it at that. I could really, like, I probably wrote like a good 2-page review on this. And I could really go on and on, but I want to erase this book and all of the other books on this list from my memory. So we're gonna end it there, call it a day. Happy birthday to me, and I'll come back to you tomorrow with my favorite books of the year and probably a much more pleasant demeanor.